Hi everyone, it's Marv here, just doing one of these, we're trying something new here, Pods We Love. I brought on a friend of mine from a previous episode from August 21st of 2022, my friend Ken Sweeney from The
Hey,
Comfortable
Marv.
Spot. Hey,
Hi.
Ken.
I'm good. How are you? Sorry for talking over you there. Very Irish of me.
It's okay, you're allowed.
So how's things? We good? Yeah.
Yeah, not bad. How's
Great.
you? Everything
Well,
okay?
it's nice to be on the other side of the microphone. I don't do it very much. I tend to do it for stuff like Star Trek podcasts and stuff like that, very geeky gear. But yeah, it's nice to be back with you. I follow your podcast. It's brilliant. So that's some amazing guests. Some guests that I've had as well, which is great. So we had a lot of guest cross contamination.
Yeah. Yeah, I loved the episode that you did with our both of our friend Sandy Kay. We both had Sandy on.
What a hard worker that woman is. I mean, she does an amazing podcast. She puts it together. It's extremely professional. She talks to really, really, really cool people.
I know. Yeah.
And it's syndicated all over the place. So please, please, please just go and have a listen to that because we're just morons compared to her. She's a real pro.
Yes. Yep.
Absolutely.
So speaking of podcasts that we love, you're here to speak about a podcast that you love.
Yeah, I'm going to talk about two, but I'm going to really delve into one because they're very, very different, but they are vital for me on a Tuesday right up to a Friday. I just get onto them and I listen to them and I love them. Now, the first one I will say, I'm going to briefly talk about it. It's All In with Chris Hayes. Chris Hayes is kind of MSNBC political correspondent. He's been on there for about 10 years. He's been on MSNBC. He's kind of really filling in for Rachel Maddow, who's kind of only got a 1 day a week show now. But we don't have MSNBC in Europe, of course. So it's good to get the podcast. And the podcast pops every evening on TV, and then it comes on the morning then the following day. So it's really only a couple of hours after it's broadcast. I love it. It's brilliant. I'm not going to talk too much about it because he's very famous and he doesn't really need to go into too much. But that's my first one, right? That's really brilliant. So All In with Chris Hayes every Tuesday to Saturday. You'll get that. But the one I really want to talk about today is one that I was actually on recently. And it's kind of like, I don't really listen to kind of life coaching, self-help stuff. I find it's a bit, let's leave it at that. But anyway, it doesn't do anything for me. Most of the people on the podcasts I find are not qualified enough to say to talk about what they're actually trying to bring up. And usually there's a kind of an edge to it. They're usually trying to make a few bob. At the end of the day, it's always kind of, well, go to my website. And you know yourself, Martin, we get these people contacting us all the time. They're kind of somebody who's had a massive accident and learned to walk on their arms or whatever the story it is. Now they've got a book out. Now they're coaching people into doing other things. So for me, that's the kind of thing I want to stay away from when I deal with guests because you get nothing out of it. But there is one podcast that I love. And I just like it because although it's actually geared more, I think, towards more women, but it's still that what I love about it is the quality. It's a bit like Sandy's podcast. It's called How to Be, and
oh yes,
yeah. It's an amazing podcast. The lady is Shashati Bashu. She's brilliant. She's a journalist, and she's been working for Channel 4, ITV, BBC. She's done it all. But what she does is with this podcast is it's about life hacks and it's life tricks. So she talks about stuff like, say, overuse of the internet or dealing with hate crime or how to deal with, issues between pressure and working in an environment that's toxic, or even just general stuff like waking up in the morning and trying to get a good night's sleep. So I don't think I can describe it as a life coach sort of thing because it's way above that. Because what she does is she reads a book. Every single podcast, she reads one or two books, and then she gets the authors on. And then she gets other people on as well for like snippets to kind of add to the actual conversation. So what you get when you listen to a podcast that she does, you're getting 45 minutes or so of 2 or 3 or 4 experts, people who are really good experts. It's not these kind of people who are just writing a book because they've had a very brief experience with heroin or something. These are really good scientists, academics, authors, people who really know what they're talking about. And when you hear the conversations and when you hear the answers, instantly this person knows what they're talking about. What I like about it is there's no hard sell in the podcast. There's no advertising of where you can get the books. There's nothing like that. It's just about a case of bringing together information, collating it in a really good way that's easy to understand, and then presenting it in a way that you actually want to hear it. So she the way her podcast starts is she introduces the topic, then she brings in, what she wants to discuss within that topic, The next thing you do is you're listening to 3 or 4 people being asked specific questions on that topic.
Yeah.
And then finally, she will speak to a main interviewee who she will also have as a full interview on YouTube or on her website. So that means you don't have to listen to an hour and a half of somebody talking at that moment if you don't want to. But she's kind of giving you that snippet. She's offering you the door to go through. And then finally, what she does, she goes back over all the information that's been, given in the podcast in a really easy to understand way, because it's actually as if she understands it after doing it all. So she tries to present it the last 10, 15 minutes, talking about and raising questions and giving answers. And the whole thing is just packaged so well. You can see that she's done lots of years as a professional journalist, and she's got great presentation skills. She's amazing. And I did have her as a guest on my podcast, so you can check it out if you want to. But like I said, it doesn't matter. I'd say forget about my podcast that she was on. Just go and listen to her podcast. So it's Shasha T. Bashu, and the podcast is called How to Be. So I give that podcast every single time 10 out of 10. There are some episodes I have no interest in listening to, but that's okay, because, that's the idea of it. Not every topic is for everybody. But I can guarantee you each episode is exactly the same in the presentation and the professionalism. It's top class. It's 10 out of 10.
Absolutely. And for anyone interested, we're in the midst of negotiating when she's going to be appearing on here, by the way.
Ooh, super. I'm so happy for that now. That's great. That's brilliant. I'm looking forward to that one.
So am I. So what are you up to yourself then with the comfortable spot? We were talking before we officially started recording about a fantastic guest that you've got, but
we'll keep that secret, will we?
Absolutely. What have you got coming up that you really want to brag about?
Oh, bragging about. Well, I just I'm kind of finding that it's easier and more difficult to get guests. Because the podcast is getting around a little bit. It's getting a good rep as well. People are kind of saying, I get comments like people say to me, oh, that's well put together, or I like the way you did that conversation, or it's not too long, it's not too this. Yeah. So, the topic this year, I think, is that I'm trying to get people who are more like from an arts, music and culture background. I will have scientists on. I have a few people as well from the space industry, because I love space. So I love talking to these people because they're just really interesting. And but what I'm really trying to look at is try and get somebody from the arts and culture. I've got a few. So this season 5, which is coming in August, is going to have a few people from the STEM industry and then a few people from arts and culture. And we might have a few musicians, or either we might have somebody who are really connected with the music industry. And you'll know what I'm talking about when you see the episodes. But the thing is, again, I think it's gone into its 5th season, and I'm kind of adopting the new modern style of Disney presentations, because the old seasons, as you and I know, Marv, would be 20 episodes, but now it's 10 episodes because, we all kind of need a break, because I think when you're doing a podcast nowadays, and a lot of people probably don't know this when they listen to it, but people like you and me, we have no professional team behind us. We don't have anybody else helping us with content, editing, production, reselling it, broadcasting it, and getting it out on the platforms and social media. We have to do that all. So at the end of the day, it's hard work. And what do we get out of it? Well, we get the opportunity to chat to people who, in some cases, as you and I know, are our boyhood heroes, or maybe something that we've always been interested in and never had the opportunity to talk to an expert on it. Like, for example, last season, I talked to Donald Hoburn about insects. I hate insects, but I'm always fascinated by them, and I think as you become more interested in a topic and you learn from experts about that topic, you begin to appreciate the fact that they're so important. So, it's things like that, and that's what I hope the podcast to continue. It's easy, again, to put the podcast into a political sense and make it more political and talk to more people from that side of things. But, everything's political nowadays. We're constantly at each other's throats. So that's why I don't go down the road of talking to too many, politicians. In fact, I've had no politicians whatsoever on the show, and it's something I'm trying to avoid. I'd be happy to talk to politicians who have retired, because I think, in a sense, the conversation would be very different, and that's something that I may consider in the future. But definitely, I'm not going to walk down that path of getting into, debates over whether, Britain should rejoin the European Union, or Donald Trump should be president, or whatever. And sure, it's okay to examine stuff like, say, Ukraine, because, there's lots of personal stories there. And I have done one episode on Ukraine. with Nadia Dobryanska. And I guess that was more of a personal thing. If you listen to that episode, you'll see that it's about her path from Ukraine to Ireland and why Ukraine is so important to her nowadays. So I think that's the thing. So season 5 has come along. It's going to be interesting. And yeah, so I hope everybody will stick around and listen to it.
Well, I mean, from what you've told me that we're not going to tell people, I mean, you've got some incredible guests that it's worth sticking around for and subscribing or following whatever you do on the platforms that you use.
Yeah. I mean, it's just we're also doing something which I'll just briefly touch on. I work for an organization which is a non-profit media organization. It's called the European Network, and we're doing a run of articles at the moment because Ireland is celebrating 50 years in the European Union. So we're doing a couple of articles. And what I've also done is I put together a kind of a short season of podcasts on that as well, which will be probably coming out around September. That's interviews with some of the people who have written articles for us in this series. And it's very interesting, actually. And to be honest, for those people who are listening and going, Jesus, here's another, I just said I wouldn't do political stuff. The European Network is a political thing. It does deal with a lot of politics. And that is kind of, as I said, it's a side. I've never said I was afraid of politics. But with this series of podcasts, I think you'll enjoy it because they're very personal, a lot of them. And, what we've done is we've got people on the podcast who've written for us to talk about the article that they've written for us. Yeah. And the thing in that is a lot of the articles are quite personal. If you go to the website and you have a read of them, you'll see that they're about when they were kids and they went on their first foreign holiday in Europe and how important that is to them at that time and so on. Or maybe it was the girl they met in France when they were on Erasmus or something like that. So it's not all kind of, the European Union is great for this and great for that, because everything has faults and failures. So there's no point in kind of brushing over that. And while we didn't pick anything negative for that series because, everyone else, I just said it before, everyone else is doing that. We decided to just go with some positive stories because whether you're into the idea of, politics, the European Union, Brexit, Britain, whatever, sometimes you just want to hear a good story. And, there's no propaganda in these stories. And that's why I think the podcast was important because I wanted to give people a voice to expand beyond their articles. And we've got some pretty good people on there as well. We've got a couple of Irish journalists. We have some people who are academics who are living abroad who are Irish. And also we've a couple of people in sport and so on. So it's pretty interesting. So I hope people can have a listen to that as well.
It sounds like with that you're giving people something that they would love, which is bringing humanity to politics, essentially.
Yeah. I mean, look, the thing is, we are not a controversial organization. We don't tout controversy. And when it does happen, we tend to ignore it. Yeah. Like, for example, there's a little thing, right? We have a logo, the EU50 logo. So when you look at the articles, you'll see that logo up there. And we have Ireland. And, it's Ireland, the Republic of Ireland. And like the Northern Ireland side of it's cut out. And we get a lot of stick over that. Every time we publish an article, people say to us, that's not Ireland. But what we're trying to do there, I think people are just trying to miss the point. We're trying to point out that Ireland is a part of a union, but it's also divided at the same time. Yeah. And that's the idea of taking Northern Ireland out of that equation. Because whatever your politics were about Brexit or whatever, at the moment, Ireland is a separated country in many ways, more than the fact that it's the Republic of Ireland and Northern Ireland. Yeah. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to show that. We're trying to say, look, not only is Northern Ireland, isolated in some ways, it's also isolated in some ways from Europe. And that's the message. It's not about being smart and saying, Northern Ireland's not part of Ireland because that's an argument we just don't want to go down. No. So, so that's exactly what you said. We just want people to feel, that they can read this article not kind of be incensed or angry or want to tweet or everybody's in a hurry to just give out, and that's why I think I tend to listen to a lot of podcasts, that go away from that, step away from that. They may be history podcasts. They may be podcasts like yours where, again, I pop it on and might be not somebody I'm too interested in, but it just clears my mind and gets me away from politics because politics nowadays is in everything. I don't know about you. You and me were younger, but I don't remember everything being so political. The fact that nowadays, if you go down the road on a chopper, rally chopper from the 1980s, somebody's going to say, well, that wasn't very comfortable for women, was it? No, and this kind of stuff. And, it's like, how can rally still be making that bike? They should design for women, as well. And it's like, Jesus, it's like, you can't do that. So I think everything's political nowadays. So if you can present something like what we do, actually, both of our podcasts, If we can present something that's just not political whatsoever, it might touch on it, it might explore it in some way, but it's not the main goal of that. I think you're onto a good thing, because that's going to become more and more popular, because people are just so sick and tired of politics, I think.
Well, I think both of us do shows that before recording this, I was recording with guys from Therapy Bites, which is about therapy or therapy stories.
Yeah.
And, I was saying to them that the good thing is, I said that doing these shows that we do, where we have a wealth of people from different backgrounds, or they do, in my case, they do different shows. I said that is sort of like almost giving you more knowledge in a way about that subject that in some cases, you weren't that interested in originally, or it wasn't something that you were. And then you'll notice something in there that piques your interest, and you'll think, oh, that's interesting in there.
Yeah.
And it just widens that, knowledge and your interest more.
Definitely. But I'm a slave to pop culture. Like I can fall down a rabbit hole very easy. I'm the most susceptible person. Throw a jersey at me from the 1980s and say, oh, that was the best jersey. I'll get into that. I go, no way. Here's 10 others that were better than that. But it's not political. It's just having a bit of crack. It's just remembering things when you were younger and saying, Jesus, I remember actually being on my first holiday in Crete in 1998, and I had the Nottingham Forest T-shirt, the jersey that they wore in the 78 European Championship. That was a freaking awesome jersey. If you want to just look up Notts Forest 1978 European Cup final. You'll see exactly what I'm talking about. If you walked into any rave in 1998, you got noticed in that jersey. Right? I actually lasted about an hour before it was reefed off me.
Wow.
It just disappeared. And at the end of the night, I woke up with another T-shirt on. So I said, shit. But like those type of things, like that's what brings back memories. I love the fact that happened to me. Now, at the time I was freaking, but now I love it. Because Jesus, it was such a thing, and I love all that. I love pop culture. I love talking about stuff that's kind of relevant to us, but also relevant in the past. And, it's great. Like my 10-year-old daughter came up to me last week and she said, Dad, you don't happen to have an MP3 player, do you? I said, I had no idea what she asked it for, but I dug out an MP3 player.
Yeah.
And I said, this is it. Probably won't work, but you can have it. And it worked, barely. But it's just these type of things. I'm a hoarder for stuff like that. So I love stuff that, you have to step away from the political a lot. And I'm very political. I think you noticed that me on Twitter. I can make the odd statement. I can be pretty harsh as well. When I'm on a podcast with a guest who've checked me out on on Twitter, they say, oh, you're much nicer in real life than you are on Twitter. It's just that sometimes I get very activated by that. But I'm trying to do that less and less. It's very hard, but I try to, but yeah, you're absolutely right. It's 100% like that.
You're making me think now about digging my iPod out and seeing if that works.
It probably won't.
It probably
but apparently there's always some genius somewhere that you can go and get an update. Like this, if you go on and just say iPod updates, I guarantee there's some person out there who's created a patch that will make your iPod 1 work. It's just, that's what I love about stuff like that. It's not lost, and that's really cool.
So anyway, how can people get hold of you then, mate, and get in touch with you and find the shows that you work on? Sure.
Real easy. The Comfortable Spot podcast.com. And if you just put in the Comfortable Spot podcast on any of the major platforms, you'll find me there. 50 episodes in, lots and lots of interesting people. I challenge you to say you haven't found one interesting person in it, because I've worked really hard with that. Eclectic is my vibe, as you know. Yeah. So one week you can be listening to a historian about Alexander the Great. The next week you can be listening to a dude that just loves records. So that's the type of thing, Don't follow me for one type.
And then the week after that, you could be speaking to somebody who makes records that people buy millions of.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I mean, look, you win some, you lose some. And it's hard, And also, I just put a big shout out there. If anybody thinks that they might be, worthy of joining me on the podcast, that sounds terrible, but I'm only joking about that. But anybody who thinks that they have something interesting, or maybe they have an interesting career, or they're a bit of an expert on stuff, I'm always interested. I always want to listen. And, it's like, for example, one of my wackiest episodes, which I really, really enjoyed, was speaking to a journalist from the United States that I spoke to about the history of the North American Soccer League. that is just like something that I've always been fascinated as a kid. And only through this podcast was I able to get that opportunity to talk, about a subject that, Michael Lewis was the guy's name. And it's just, it's just amazing to get an opportunity to talk to a chap who was there at the very time, who was a journalist, a young journalist when that was kicking off, because you really get the vibe of it. And again, it comes from me having a pop culture love, but that's what it is. So if anybody has anything interesting that they want to share, maybe they have a good story, or maybe they have a good thing coming out, or a good book, get in touch.
Okay. Thanks very much for this, mate. Thanks a lot.
No worries, man. Talk to you soon.
Yep. As usual, everybody can find Pods Like Us on, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, and actually on Threads now as well. But you can also contact us through podslikeus@gmail.com. Anyway, take care, everybody.